Hi, everybody. This is Matthew Poes of Poes Acoustics, and we're talking about the hidden costs of cheap equipment. So, how many of you have had this experience? It doesn't have to be audio equipment. It could be a car, a house. I could tell you stories about us doing that actually with all these things: car, house, stereo equipment, lawnmower, bicycle, I don't know, sneakers, vacation, whatever, where you looked at the options and you probably looked at a range. You looked at the cheapest way to do it. You looked at a couple of middle of the road options and you looked at the most expensive. And your knee-jerk reaction was like, oh, I want that most expensive option. That looks cool. So if we get out of audio equipment, we can talk about some things. When my wife and I were looking to buy our first home, we were living together in Chicago. And there's what we wanted conceptually, what we dreamed about, right? What we could afford and what was available. So we looked at some stuff, and what we eventually narrowed it down to was, so obviously sky's the limit in terms of what's available in houses in Chicago. Homes, I should say. There were apartments that would have been in the Gold Coast area that, penthouse suites for millions of dollars. We couldn't afford that. That wasn't going to happen as our first home. We knew that, but we had narrowed it down to a range of options. They were a couple $100,000, and it's like we could get an apartment, maybe 1,200 square feet, 2-bedroom in Lincoln Park, but maybe not the nicest part of Lincoln Park, or a little bit outside of that. There were some other parts of Chicago we looked at. We could get a fixer-upper. We actually found one. To this day, I kind of regret we didn't buy it. It would have been like, I think we put in an offer of $130,000 and they took it, but it had a mold problem, which could have been fixed. Actually, somebody did buy it and fix it, but we got scared and didn't follow through with the deal. But anyway, we looked at that, and all of these were nice, potential, luxurious homes. They just needed a little bit of work in our price point. And then we could move out of the city, which is what we did, and get into a suburb and buy in one of the developments. And then there was the same kind of thing. Like, you could buy an older home for less. You could buy a middle of the road, what do they call, track home, or you could buy a higher end one. And we looked at what we could afford, and we kind of just settled on something that was, in a sense, it was the biggest but least nice home, but still it was new. It was new construction. So biggest, least nice home we could get for our budget. And we hated it. I don't think we ever really, we put on a nice face and we're like, oh, we love our home, but we did not love our home. And we put a bunch of money into it. I built a theater in the basement, and we put in new floors and all this. And eventually we just moved, in part because we didn't like where we moved to, and in part because the home was never up to our standards. When I was trying to think of other good examples, like vacations, we've gone on vacations before where we looked at different options, and there was the nice hotel and the crappy hotel. And the thought was, well, we'll get the crappy hotel because who cares about the hotel? We're going to really be focused on the experience. And there's giant cockroaches and lizards in your room. And it's like, man, I wish I'd bought the nice hotel. And you look at it in the big picture and you think, I could have afforded the nice hotel. It wasn't so expensive I would have been broke. It just was more than I wanted to spend. It really comes back to perceived value. So let's go back to audio now, the actual point of this. How often have you bought a piece of audio equipment where the expensive stuff, you could afford it, you just couldn't see the value in it, and so you went with something that you felt was going to give you everything you wanted, and then you regretted the decision? So the hidden cost of cheap audio, and cheap doesn't have to be cheap, really cheap, it can just be cheaper than it needs to be to meet your needs, is that you rebuy. So obviously with the vacation example, very few people would go on vacation and then say, well, I didn't like the vacation I bought, so I'm going to go on the exact same vacation, but with a nicer hotel. That's pretty unusual. But you might think on the next vacation, you'll spend more money, right? Or with the house, like we did this time, we just decided to spend more than we thought we could afford or that made sense, recognizing we technically could afford what we spent. And I've never been unhappy at all with the decision we made. I love the house we built. And, the home theater I did, same thing. I spent more than I really intended to, but I'm super happy with it. I love it, and I'm glad that I spent up on it. And I get clients all the time that say they want to upgrade, and a lot of their stuff they bought really recently. It's not old stuff. It's very rare that I end up doing systems where I redo the whole system for them because it's 20 or 30 years old. More often than not, what happens is that they come in and it's 1 or 2 year old gear that they bought that they read on the forums was the best thing money can buy, but it's actually really cheap. And then it turns out that on certain performance parameters like noise and distortion, yeah, it was as good as anything else out there. But on the features that matter to give you the experience you wanted, like calibration capabilities and channel count and things like that, no, it wasn't. And so you end up replacing your receiver with a better processor. Or the speakers. Yeah, they measured really good, but they didn't play loud enough for you, or they didn't have the sound you wanted, or something didn't match what you thought. Whatever, who knows? Or subwoofers. That's a really common one. People buy subwoofers and then realize they get addicted quick. They want more subwoofers, or bigger, or both. So what happens is people end up in a cycle where they're spending and spending and spending to rebuy stuff they already bought that just wasn't the right stuff. So the hidden cost of cheap equipment, like I said, is that you rebuy it. And the better thing to do is to really think more carefully in the first place about what it is you need to give you the experience you want. Often when I'm working with clients, I'll say, hey, look, can I get you to pause? I get it's fun to buy equipment. All those new toys, they're sexy and they look cool and they're fun and you get to brag to your friends. I totally understand it. I'm no different than you are. But the problem is if you get into a cycle of just buying things every time you see a sale on something that people recommend on the forums, and you get a whole pile of good gear, that doesn't mean I or you can turn that into a good system for your needs. It just means you have a pile of good gear. So I end up having to say, please, let's stop. No more good gear. Let's wait. Let's have a conversation. We call this discovery in the industry. Let's find out what it is you want. And we're going to do that together because you probably don't know exactly what you want. I don't know what you want. Let's have a conversation, figure that out. Once I understand what you need, then I can start to use that to create performance targets and get you the gear you need. Look, you don't have to hire me and use somebody like me. This could be true at the lowest end of the market where you're just going to go into a Best Buy. You can do discovery on yourself. You can sit there and just say to yourself, well, what is it that I want and why? What would be the right equipment for that? I was talking about, let's say something like a Denon receiver versus a Trinnov processor when I mentioned the two different levels, even though the performance is similar in certain specs, they're very different in other ways. Well, think about a sound bar. So I'm not picking on Vizio too much here, but like I had a Vizio sound bar and I also had a Sonos sound bar. The Sonos sound bar had a better app. It worked better. It was more consistent and the sound quality was substantially better. Build quality was better and it looked better too. So the soundbar wasn't to give me like a high-end home theater experience. I just wanted better than TV sound. I wanted to be able to have it be easier to hear speech and to be able to play music occasionally on. And the Vizio soundbar, even though it was cheaper, was a waste of money. It sounded really bad and I didn't like it. And I ended up it just took up space till I gave it away to somebody at some point. The Sonos soundbar was actually quite good. I think it was like 3 times or 4 times more expensive, but I think it was worth the extra money and it's what I should have bought in the first place because the other thing ended up being just a waste and it made me not happy. So what I'd say to you guys is think carefully about your purchases. I don't want you to spend more than you can afford, but the term afford has a lot of meanings to it and value also has a lot of different meanings to it. And really this comes back to perceived value. Try to understand that sometimes stuff that seems too expensive may not actually be too expensive. It's that the cheap stuff is actually too cheap. It's too junky to meet your needs. And it's just hard to tell because the specs don't tell you everything. And make sure you buy equipment that really does meet your needs. And if you're not sure, ask an expert who can help you to figure that out. So I hope this video was helpful. Keep on watching. Oh, the light came out. That's going to be odd in the video. Oh, well, it happens. So yeah, keep on watching. We got more videos coming. Thanks.